So, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Red Bricks. This is Abhishek Kekani, and I have Aditya Das as a co host today. Our guest for today is Mr. Ankur Kanaglekar. Ankur is an aviation enthusiast who believes the power of aviation can inspire generations and help tap new frontiers. He's optimistic of India growing as a world class defense industrial base. He currently works as head India Fighter Sales, Boeing India. He has worked across USA, Europe, and India in the industrial, automotive, and the aerospace sector, spanning his career of over 20 years. Education-wise, he's done his bachelor's in mechanical engineering from University of Pune, followed by a master's in mechanical engineering from University of Cincinnati. He's a 2007 PGPX alumni from IIM Ahmedabad. In his personal time, he loves to travel. He's traveled to 27 countries, although that's taken a pause this year because of COVID. So, welcome to this episode of Beyond the Red Bricks, Ankur. Thanks a lot for taking time out and talking with us today.
Yeah, absolutely, Abhishek. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to you. Happy to have a chat and share any wisdom, if you could call that, with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much, Ankur. I think we'll get started. The first section that we wanted to cover and focus on was your career and profile. So, if you can give us a brief description about your current role and the kind of initiatives that you lead at Boeing, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, sure. So I head the fighter sales activity for Boeing Defense in India. Now, with respect to fighter sales that you may be aware that there are two campaigns going on. There is one with Indian Air Force for 114 aircraft, and there is another one with Indian Navy for 57 carrier-borne fighters. So I lead the sales activities for these campaigns, as those are called. These are probably one of the largest defense programs in the world in the aviation today that are going on in terms of just the scale. What do I mean by sort of leading the sales activity? It is not just about interfacing with customers, but it also involves managing the entire sales campaign. And the elements of all that are related to strategy and the execution of that sales strategy. But more importantly, it involves coordination with the Indian government, the Indian Armed Forces, the US government, because the fighter sales typically happen in a government-to-government deal. I'm also responsible for setting up the alliances, joint ventures, and partnerships in India, which are related to this particular fighter aircraft deal that are going on. So from that standpoint, we are getting, me and my team are getting involved in the joint venture and some of the other activities with Indian companies. There is also an aspects around marketing and working very closely with media and some of the other stakeholders, which comes with these large sales campaign. You asked about, what some more information about the role. I would say it's pretty exciting role. One, because I was and I am extremely passionate about fighters. Right from my childhood, it was my hobby, and now my hobby has turned into a job. So nothing like that, right? I lead a cross-functional team, an international team actually based in the United States and in India for these campaigns. So the people management and all the aspects related to that, and obviously the joint venture. And to be, very frank with you, since we are in a safe zone, when I started out, I thought it was probably one of the most complex role, as you could imagine, just looking at the scale of the runs into multi-billion dollars, right? And sometimes they say that the defense sales tend to go so high. Some of these deals are as high as GDPs of some of the smaller nations out there. So leading a complex campaign where there is, high level of visibility, but at the same time, it's pretty complex because of the bureaucracy involved and the cross-national interface, and it sits at the intersection of all what is happening in the geopolitics today. So understanding and working with that, I thought it was quite exciting. So that's what I do. This is my probably fourth role in Boeing, and prior to that, as I mentioned to you earlier, I have worked on the civil aviation side on the services side. Before that, I also led the strategy and business development for Boeing in India. So that's all about it. Hope that helps.
Yeah, Ankur, yeah, that's really helpful. It's great to see that you're able to turn your passion into work and like try and get a career in that domain. So that's really good to know and inspiring to know. I guess moving on, we also just wanted to know the trends that you see coming up in the aviation sector over the last couple of years, based on your experience.
Yeah. So when you talk about the trends in aviation, remember that aviation is at I would probably split it into defense, aerospace, and the commercial aerospace, which are two very distinct branches, I would say. And the technologies they do overlap. Sometimes the technologies move from one sector to another. But generally, the technological evolution and the trends that we see in both of these sectors are fairly different. So now, if you're specifically talking about the defense, there has been evolution happening on sort of two fronts. The first one is about what they call it as a next generation of air dominance portfolio of technologies that have been built. And these technologies revolve around stealth and advanced communication, networking, adaptive cycle performance. This is a new jet engine technology, unmanned and autonomous system that many people are familiar with, just to name few. And so a lot of work is happening here. A lot of investments are going in, and this is fundamentally, if successful, is going to change the way the air dominance fighters look in the future. The other trend that is happening, the second one, is actually quite interesting. The first one, as far as I'm concerned, and that is about the business model innovation regarding the buying of the defense platforms on the aviation side. And what is happening over here is, instead of going to a single original equipment manufacturers, there has been concept floated where there are portfolios of technologies that have been built by different OEMs. And because of the advancement in digital engineering, they are trying to rapidly shrink the cycle of development of these platforms, which typically run into decades. And the idea is that you rapidly develop a platform, you rapidly bring in various portfolios of technologies that different companies are bringing in. So it doesn't happen that winner takes it all. And then you shorten the life cycle of how soon you're going to get to the next level of fighter technologies, right? Which obviously keeps you ahead of your adversaries. So the digitization of engineering data, system decision-making, all that is expected to reduce the development time. And this is something has started in the US, and in defense aviation, certainly a very welcome innovation from the business model standpoint. Now, just shifting the tracks on the commercial side, which is where, as all of you are aware, because of the COVID-19 situation, the airlines are going through tough time, deep recession, and the priority really there is to come out of the recession, and more importantly, to instill the confidence in general public that it is okay and safe to fly. Right. So a lot of technologies in that relation have been developed in a short span of time, or and reducing the environmental impact. Now, when you talk about the aviation sustainability, the focus there is on developing the technologies that efficiently make use of the airspace while optimizing the carbon emission and the footprint, and obviously the noise. So a lot of work is happening in that area, but the first priority is to instill the confidence in the public so that the demand comes back, right? So those are some of the things I would say trends, as you mentioned, related to aviation.
Thanks, Ankur. So I have a couple of follow-up questions to that, I think, which kind of brings back to the first two answers that we had. So I just want to understand, how does, in your role, how does managing relations work? Now, where I'm coming from is something of the sort, you're selling a very high-end equipment to the defense, the defense industry of a country. And certainly all different countries would have their own requirements of what goes with them. And these are the OEMs that we'll work with. And also there's an element of one-upmanship that can come in, because let's say that you have a very advanced fighter and, a rival might have some other version of it. So how do you kind of navigate this very, tense geopolitical / relation, the relations that you have in there. How does that fit into your role, or do you face it, or does it come up in conversations of that sort?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the key part of the role, right? Generally, countries buy advanced military equipment from other nations when there is alignment of those two nations on a variety of areas, right? So the relationship and the geopolitical equation sits right at the center of fighter sales. And as you rightly said, the requirements for a nation buying the fighter versus the nation selling can sometimes vary, right? So the fundamentals of sales, they don't change in this role. The relationships still are extremely important. Knowing your your customer and their pain points and how what you're offering is going to solve that is obviously very important, just like in any type of sales. What changes over here is really the gestation of this particular sale. It's a long sales cycle, so you have to be in this to play long innings. This is not a sprint, this is a marathon, right? So from that standpoint, we tend to work on or work with various stakeholders on both sides of the system, highlighting the importance of the defense system that we are bringing in and how that is going to help the country that is buying it, right? There is a lot of requirements around localization or indigenization, not only in India, but in other countries where the fighters are sold. And that becomes a crucial part of this offer, where countries tend to see themselves not as buyer, but as partners in building and co-developing these technologies. Now, aerospace being a field where the entry barriers are very high, the gestation time is high, the initial investment required is very high. So how do you still make sure that the company or the countries that are buying the aircraft get their fair share of industrialization benefit out of this, keeping in mind the technology release constraints and some of the other things that we have to follow from the US side. So that's the trick, and that's what makes this whole job quite exciting and yet complex, because you have to navigate these issues at every stage, right? And from that standpoint, again, your ability to forge those relationships, your ability to understand the bigger picture, your obviously understanding of your own products and how you articulate the advantages, all those things become very important.
Thanks, Ankur. I just had a quick follow-up again. So initially you mentioned there's some work that needs to be done right now on the commercial side because of COVID and the recession that like all the countries are facing. So we just wanted to understand, is there any change in the business model that you foresee coming up in the aviation sector on the commercial side because of COVID, and any impact long-term or short-term that you foresee?
Right. So anytime you see a disruption of this level in any industry, I think it's fair to expect that the structure of the industry is going to change, at least in the short term. Now, the good news here is the air traffic, based on the past data, continues to be resilient in spite of some of these disruptive changes that come in. We have an example of 9/11. We have several other examples where similar situation had arisen. Now, again, nothing compares with COVID. We are aware about that. But the demand for air travel across the world, which is tied to the economic growth, especially in the developing world, and as the economies come out of COVID, the travel will come back, because the world is too globalized, too connected to sort of go back few steps, right? So we are going to see in the near term airlines utilizing various means to stay afloat, because that is a priority. And what that means is you will see some business innovation around seeing, instead of selling seats, seeing this as an entire sort of a retail activity from end to end. Now, would that create more revenue stream? That is to be seen. Obviously, there is going to be a lot of effort on keeping the passengers safe, and I explained about some of the technologies that will go on over there. But in the short term, you will see some innovative business model that to ensure that the route structure is optimized properly. The airlines are operationally balanced in the right way to go after that route structure. And more importantly, in their operations and in their strategy, they build enough flexibility because, there's a lot of uncertainty from month to month, depending on how the cases go up or down and how that impacts the demand, right? What also going to happen is there's going to be more focus on services, and particularly about the digitization and the tools that help achieve some of these optimization and flexibility that I described earlier, right? So there'd be more demand for those things because, the customers may want to get it right. And if they don't get it right, it will have a huge implications on their business. So that may happen in the short term until the demand comes back.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's interesting to know. And just shifting gears a little bit now with our questions. So the next question we had was, currently Boeing and Airbus are like the two biggest manufacturers globally for airlines. On your end, do you foresee local airline manufacturing picking up in India in the foreseeable future? Because technically it's a capital intensive industry and relies a lot on government support. So just wanted to understand your take on the same and what your views are.
Yeah, so I think what you mean by airline manufacturing is what you were hinting at, aircraft manufacturing, right? In India, right? So so basically, from Boeing side, we have embedded several suppliers from India into our global supply chain. We actually more than $1 billion worth of products and services we buy every year from India that go into Boeing aircraft. So we already are engaged in tremendous amount of industrialization in terms of bringing these suppliers into the aviation fold. But when it comes to actually assembly of aircraft, you will notice that there are only a handful of locations and countries across the world where the manufacturing and assembly of commercial aircraft happens. And as you rightly mentioned, one of the reasons for that is high entry barriers, huge government support, and long gestation time. But also, these are the locations where there is a very advanced aerospace ecosystem that is developed, whether you're talking about Seattle or Southern California or other places in Europe and things like that. So for India to be on that map, I think there are some preconditions that needs to be fulfilled. And in my opinion, top three conditions that needs to be fulfilled are: one, there has to be significantly high demand of commercial aircraft that are to be used in India. And this is obviously tied to the GDP growth, which is tied to the passengers traveling and which then results into airline wanting bigger fleet, right? The second thing that is required is ability of Indian private and public sector industries to invest huge amount of capital to build this capability. And the numbers are staggering if you want to do it right now. So really the demand has to be there for it to make sense. And the third thing is, as I mentioned earlier, the capability, right? So here you're talking about certain skills related to engineering, system integrations that need to be instilled into the talent pool, right? And this obviously requires a lot of focus, again, on investing in skilling, innovation, world-class manufacturing techniques, and mindset mainly, right? So these three things need to happen. And it's a depending on how things grow after COVID, some of these things may come back. But the fair question, in my opinion, is to really ask is, where does India want to play? Do we want to be the assembler of large commercial aircraft and rebuild something which has been done elsewhere? And by the way, it's going to require huge amount of capital and demand to make that happen. Or would you rather leverage your capability in engineering and software and IT and play in niche areas which are going to come up quite rapidly in the aviation, right? So I'm referring to things like avionics or the networked aspects of communication, right? optimization of airspace, of the airport infrastructure, just to name few things, right? And obviously the support, the excellent support for engineering and design that several companies in India are involved in. So where do you want to play? That is, I think, the question needs to be asked. I'm not suggesting one is better versus other, but the cost-benefit equation for both these options is very different. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ankur. I think I have a slight follow-up because if I'm kind of looking at the aviation sector or the aircraft manufacturer, as you put it, play out right now, would you think that companies like Embraer or Bombardier are a bit more accessible avenues for an Indian foray into this sector? Or
well, I mean, if that question, I hope, is related to a baseline demand. Certainly, right now the industry is going through some distress.
This is not a good
times,
time,
right? It's not a good time to check into that, right? But to answer your question at a broad level, look, it is not always about having or filling your seats with a smaller aircraft. It's an ecosystem, so you need to have access to simulators. You need to have pilots who are trained on that particular aircraft, and obviously the ground support equipment and the maintenance and MRO and all the capabilities around that, right? Now, if you bring an aircraft which has not been used before or which has a smaller scale, then you end up investing in some of these other aspects, and the overall business model just doesn't work, right? So from that standpoint, the workhorse of the airline on the single aisle and twin aisle, logically that makes more sense for India, right? Now, there is a school of thought that as India grows in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and you get schemes like Udan, where new airports come up in remote areas where the runways are not long and the demand is small, can there be scope for the smaller aircraft, right? Frankly, the jury is still out on that. I think from the demand side, that picture may sound attractive, but can you make money on that using smaller aircraft? It is still to be seen. Does that answer your question?
Sure, Ankur. I think it goes a long way in answering that, because the economics of flying and actually building planes is such a fascinating topic. I think we can have a few podcasts on that itself. So I think slightly to switch tracks over here and coming back into the defense, the fighter aircraft or that industry of those sort of things. I think one of the most anticipated, and I think probably the biggest defense contract of all time, would be the Joint Strike Fighter, right? So I think back then you had the Boeing X-32 go up against the X-35, which became the current Lockheed Martin F-35. But there's also this, the Boeing defense presence in actually the Lockheed Martin F-22. So how do these relations work in this sphere? That at one level you're competing fiercely to be the top dog of the best fighters out there, and then again at the other end you're working with what would some would call your rival in a sense to actually build the best technologies you can out there. So how does this dichotomy kind of how can this be explained, or how does this whole ecosystem work? Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, sure. So there are many such examples. The two that you highlighted are obviously quite well known, but it boils down to I think the maturity of the ecosystem and the regulatory aspects of it, right? And so from that standpoint, companies compete in certain arena. They play by the book, right, based on the regulation of that particular nation. And in certain other cases, because of the high investment required or some of the other factors where they want to come together and build something together, because it is all about the competitiveness of that industry, right? When government buys, most of the time it is a value-based buy. It could be based on the lower price, and if a company A cannot get there on its own, there is openness to go and partner with company B together, as long as there are the right regulation and the Chinese walls are built between what is shared, what cannot be shared, and how it all works, right? So it again doesn't happen overnight. This has been happening in the US aviation industry for last more than 60 years, right? From the later part of First World War days, you will find similar examples, right? The consolidation has happened where Boeing itself has sort of bought several what we call as a legacy aviation companies, including McDonnell Douglas, and competed with others out there, right? So it's that's how I think that maturity gets built as the industry goes up and down. It goes through the cycles, and then obviously the government has to play a major role in making sure that everybody plays by the rules, right? So it is quite common and quite fascinating, actually, in a way where you're competing with somebody on a particular side of the business, but on the other side you're actually partnering with them, right? But in the end, I believe it brings the best in everybody, because this industry is so fascinating. It is the engineering and technology that needs to get developed requires smart minds, and the smart minds are everywhere. They're not only with Boeing or not only with Airbus. And if the ecosystem allows you to bring the smart minds together in a structured way, then I think it creates magic, as we see on the examples that you shared.
Thanks, Ankur. It's just the same thing again, right? It's one of the reasons why people fall in love with planes and in the first place, and then this whole ecosystem that's built around it. Again, it's just so fascinating, but I think we'll have to switch gears now and come to what I think might be quite interesting to the PGPX folk right now, and probably the prospective PGPX folk who might join in the future. So my question is this then. You did your master's in mechanical from the University of Cincinnati. And then there was a 9-year gap between you coming back to the IIM Ahmedabad campus as a PGPX student. In the meantime, you were working at Altair, the SI Group, and I2 Technologies. So going from this track, after a gap of 9 years, what made you think of the PGPX program as, you know what, this is something I need to do next, and this is where my future lies? So what was that decision process that you took after, considerable experience and your education?
So as you rightly explained, that I worked in the engineering field after my MS, both in the US and in India. And I think really as I was working in supply chain, in automotive engineering, and the crash testing related software for automotive, these are highly technical areas. I realized that the business side of that equation excites me quite more than obviously working on the engineering side. And with that realization, I thought that I need to get some formal education in on the business side. Now, I was in the US at that time. I had decided that I did not want to stay back in the US and wanted to come back to India. And from that standpoint, I decided if I want to come back and stay in India, then rather have that education from the premier Indian MBA school, because the knowledge that they would impart would be very relevant to the way the business is done in India. And though with the globalization, there is a lot of commonality, but the way businesses are done across countries, that still matters. And from that standpoint, I came back and applied for PGPX after working for a couple of years in India. And that's how actually I got into the MBA program, because I thought that's where I wanted to go. And I would probably say that one of the best decisions of my life. So other than just getting the knowledge and the brand and developing relationship with peers, PGPX really offered a path to put the knowledge that I learned in the course in the real world experience, by giving opportunity initially for me to work in a management consulting, where you're trying to solve business problems for a variety of clients. And I focus mainly on aerospace, automotive, and industrial, because that was, again, very close to my heart. And then once, that I did for a few years, with my love of aerospace and experience in consulting in aerospace with a variety of clients, mainly outside of India, I thought that this would be a right thing to move to an aerospace organization and That's how I applied to Boeing and got here.
That brings us the full circle then. It's a fascinating journey that you just outlined. And I think it'll resonate pretty well with a lot of folks out there who are, I'm sure, interested in the business side of things as well, and maybe finding their feet in what they really like to do and what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would also add that, again, in my case, the aerospace, as I mentioned earlier, tends to be heavily engineered industry, right? It's a very technical, it's engineers industry rather. And from that standpoint, my higher education and master's in US in mechanical engineering, that came very handy. Even though I'm working on the sales side right now, as I mentioned earlier, what we are trying to sell is not a bunch of widgets. We are trying to sell extremely complex defense systems that cost many $billion. And a good understanding of how the technology and the engineering behind the technology works comes very handy when you're trying to sell these things, right? So I think the engineering background there definitely came handy along with the PGPX experience.
Thanks, Ankur. That's really fascinating. I think maybe after this, we can take a stroll down memory lane, so to speak. How was your time at the IIM Ahmedabad and PGPX? Since you were one of the earliest batches to pass out, what were your fondest memories over here? Your professors, subjects that stood out to you, and the things you got up to while you were here that kind of have made a mark on you, and you think upon.
Wow, I need to refresh my memory over here. It's been ages. But as you rightly said, I think we were in the second batch. So from that standpoint, the course was just getting stood up. And there were some teething troubles initially. To a certain extent, we experienced that. But I had, amazing 1 year out there. I think the time that I enjoyed most was actually with my syndicate team, along with obviously the class participation and other fun things that you do. But we had an amazing syndicate, Group H. We are still in touch. And the late night meetings and working jointly on assignments and projects, I mean, we had amazing fun doing that. In addition to that, I think the certain courses, they really came handy, even in the real life after PGPX. I mean, one that I remember with Professor Jerry Rao, this was, I think, related to international business. I kind of live and breathe that life every day right now. And sort of looking back, I think how relevant it was at that time. Obviously, I did not realize at that time, but now I do. Its implication of that, the knowledge and the information that we got through Professor Rao. In addition to that, I think loved courses around strategy, but more around operational efficiency, operational management and supply chain and things like that. Because a lot of that work I had done earlier, but there's always new opportunities to learn. So I think overall it was an amazing time. The 1 year actually went too soon, I would think.
Yeah, I think we are seeing that for ourselves right now.
Yeah.
we are running out of time and need to make the most of it over here. So, Ankur, any words for the people who might be kind of interested in this program, who want to come in but are unsure about the program or this change in their careers or something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is would be one of the best decisions you would make in your life. I think PGPX has a lot to offer. I understand the program has matured quite a bit over the course of last many years, and now it is it was always a great brand, but now it is even better, right? And if you are looking at doing something different than where your current career trajectory is taking you, this is the best entry vehicle for you to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to change your industry or line when you come out of PGPX. I've seen many successful people who have graduated and went back to their original industry or organization, and they're doing extremely well. But if you have in you to take a little bit of risk and try something new, and while doing it, develop relationship for life with some of the most smartest people in India, and obviously do that while you enjoy 1 year, then definitely this is the right program. It certainly helped me, and I just hope that whoever is listening to the podcast thinks seriously about this program, applies to it, and hopefully they get opportunity to join PGPX.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ankur. This was really good to know. And I think all the information that you shared with us about the aviation sector, about your time at Boeing, it was really helpful. At least for me personally, I think Aditya had some background about it. So, but for me personally, I had no information or background. So it was like a very good learning experience. And the thoughts that you shared about the PGPX program as well, I think it's going to be very helpful for people who are seriously considering the PGPX program and look forward to make a career transition or a change in career trajectory after the program. So, and I think Aditya and I, both of us, would just like to thank you for taking time out today and talking with us for this episode of Our Life Beyond the Red Bricks. So, thanks a lot again, Ankur, for taking time out.
Sure, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and hope to keep in touch with you. Thanks.
Same here. Thanks, Ankur.
Thanks. Bye.